After the funeral, my ex-wife grabbed my arm and said, "Act like my husband for the next 40 minutes." And I stood there frozen, because the man they'd just buried was her husband, not me. I'm the one she divorced 4 years ago. I'm the one she walked away from. But now her fingers were digging into my arm at the back of that funeral home, her eyes begging me not to ask questions, and every soul in that room believed a version of her life that wasn't true. I'm Sam Whitaker. I'm 36, and I fix broken things for a living. Furniture nobody else will save, chairs and cradles and tables people can't bring themselves to throw out. Which is the cruel joke of my whole life, because the one person I swore I'd never give up on, I let walk away. Nora was the woman I built 9 years around. The woman I promised I'd never stop fighting for. But I did stop. The day her illness convinced her she was a burden, and she made herself the villain, so I wouldn't have to be the man who left. She married another man after me, and now that man was in a box at the front of the room, and she was clinging to me. I didn't say no. I put my hand over hers and said, "I've got you." But the second I did, a frail old woman with a cane started making her way toward us across that room, and I understood I'd just agreed to a lie I had no idea how to keep. So why did the man she left me for spend his last breath talking about me? Why was my wedding ring, the one I gave her 9 years ago, hidden on a chain against her skin at another man's funeral? And what was I supposed to do when those 40 minutes were up, and she tried to hand me back like I was never hers to keep? Let me back up, because you deserve to understand how a man ends up standing at the back of a stranger's funeral, holding the hand of the woman who broke his heart. I hadn't planned to go inside. I want you to know that. I'd seen the obituary 3 days before, on an ordinary morning, coffee going cold in my hand. Arthur Bell, 71. Beloved husband of Nora Bell. That name, Nora, hit me like a dropped plank across the back of the knees. Her married name, a name that wasn't mine anymore. I read it 4 times before I let myself believe the woman in that little paragraph was my Nora. And the truth is, I almost didn't come. I told myself I had no right. I told myself she'd made her choice 4 years ago, and a man doesn't walk into the funeral of the person his ex-wife chose over him and stand there like he belongs. But something pulled me out of my shop that morning. Something made me put on the one dark suit I own, the one I'd last worn to my own father's funeral. Something drove me 40 minutes down the highway to a town I'd never lived in, to a funeral home with white pillars and a smell of lilies so thick it sat in the back of my throat. I only meant to stand in the back, see that she was surviving, say a silent goodbye to a man I'd never met, a man who got the life I couldn't hold on to, and then slip out before anyone knew a stranger had come and gone. That was the plan. That was the whole plan. The room was full of people who loved Arthur. You could feel it. There's a weight in a room where a good man has died, a kind of soft heaviness, like everyone is moving through water. Older folks, mostly. Men in suits that didn't fit the way they used to. Women pressing tissues to the corners of their eyes. A framed photo up front of a man with white hair and a face full of laugh lines. The kind of face that makes you trust him before he said a word. Arthur. He looked kind. That was the first thing I felt, standing there. A strange, aching gratitude that the man who'd taken care of my Nora had a kind face. And then I saw her. She was near the front, in a black dress, her back to me. But I'd have known her from across a stadium. The set of her shoulders, the way she held her chin up even when everything in her was falling down. I'd watched her do that in doctors' offices, in that little bathroom in our old apartment when she thought I was asleep. 4 years, and my whole body still recognized her before my mind caught up. There was gray at her temples now. That undid me a little. She'd gotten older without me. She'd been sick without me. She'd buried a husband without me. I should have left right then. I was turning to go. I swear I was. When she turned her head, just slightly, and saw me. I watched it move across her face in stages. Confusion first, then disbelief, like her grief had started serving up ghosts. Then something I couldn't name, something that made her hand come up to her chest and press flat against it, right over her heart. And then she was moving, crossing that whole crowded room, weaving between mourners, her eyes locked on me like I was the only fixed thing in a spinning world. She reached me at the coat rack. Up close, she looked exhausted in the way grief exhausts you, hollowed out under the eyes. But her hands, when they grabbed my arm, were strong. Both of them, wrapped around my forearm, holding on like she was drowning and I was the last solid thing in reach. Sam, my name came out of her like a breath she'd been holding for 4 years. You came. You actually came. Nora, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. I was just going to. Please don't ask questions. Her voice dropped, low and fast, the words tumbling. I know I have no right. I know. But I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it right now. Act like my husband, just for the next 40 minutes. Please. I stared at her. What? Act like my husband. Her fingers dug in harder, until they take his mother home. Please, Sam. 40 minutes. That's all. And then I'll explain everything, or I'll explain nothing, and you can walk out that door and never think about me again. But right now I am begging you. And here's the thing you have to understand about me. I'm not a fast man. I don't lie. I deal in solid things, in wood and glue and the honest weight of a thing that's built right. Everything in me should have said no. This was insane. This was a funeral. This was her dead husband's funeral, and she was asking me to pretend to be her living one. But I looked at her face, and under the panic, under the desperation, I saw the woman I'd loved for 9 years, drowning in front of me, and I have spent my whole life unable to walk past a broken thing. It's the one wound I've never healed, so I did the only thing my hands know how to do. I steadied her. I put my hand over both of hers, warm and firm, and I said quietly, "Okay, I've got you." Something in her shoulders came down an inch, relief so pure it hurt to look at. And that's the exact moment the old woman started toward us. She was tiny, 90 if she was a day, in a black dress and a little black hat, leaning on a cane with a hand that shook. But her eyes were sharp as broken glass, and they were pointed straight at me. Every slow step of her cane on that hardwood floor sounded like a clock ticking. That's Ruth, Nora breathed against my shoulder, barely moving her lips. Arthur's mother. She's 94. Her heart is bad, Sam. It's really bad. And she believes her son had a marriage full of love. It's the only thing holding her up today. Please, whatever she asks, please. I didn't have time to answer. Ruth was there. Nora, darling. The old woman reached out and took Nora's hand from my arm, folding it into her own papery one. Her voice was thin, but it carried. There you are. I lost you and all these people. Then those sharp eyes came up and landed on me, and they moved over my face slow and careful, the way you'd inspect a joint to see if it would hold weight. And who is this? The whole room seemed to go quiet. It didn't. I know it didn't, but that's how it felt. Like the floor had tilted and everything was sliding toward that one question. I felt Nora go rigid beside me. I felt her stop breathing. And I don't fully understand what I did next. I'm not a fast man, but something about the word please, still hanging in the air, and something about the way this frail old woman was looking up at me, with her whole heart in her eyes. It moved my arm before my brain had voted on it. I slid it around Nora's back, settled my hand at her waist, in the exact place it used to live, like it had never once left, and I heard myself say, easy as breathing, "I'm Sam, ma'am. I look after her. I have for a long time." I felt Nora flinch, then melt, like a wire pulled tight and suddenly cut. Ruth's face. Oh, her face. It cracked wide open into the most beautiful smile, the kind of smile that has tears sitting right behind it. "Oh," she said. Her old hand tightened on Nora's. "Oh, thank God. Thank God." She looked at me, and her chin trembled. "I have been so afraid of her being alone, young man. You have no idea. A woman shouldn't grieve alone." She patted Nora's cheek with a shaking hand. "My Arthur worried about that too, sweetheart. Right up to the very end, he worried about you being alone." And then she said something that stopped my heart cold. "He'd be so glad you're not." Nora made a small sound. I felt it more than heard it, a little breaking sound in her chest, and I tightened my arm around her to hold her up, because I could feel her legs deciding whether to work. "Come sit with me," Ruth said, already turning. already tugging Nora's hand. "Both of you. I want to look at the two of you. At my age, you learn to just look at good things while you still can." So we followed her. What else could I do? I walked a 94-year-old stranger to a padded folding chair with my arm around my ex-wife's waist, and I lowered Ruth down gentle, and I crouched to make sure her cane was in reach. And the whole time, I felt Nora's eyes on the side of my face, like she was watching a man she used to know come back from the dead. For the next while, we sat with Ruth, and I learned how to be Nora's husband by watching Nora be Ruth's daughter-in-law. She was good with the old woman, tender, patient, wiping the corner of Ruth's mouth when her tea dribbled, laughing softly at the same story told for the third time. And I filled in around her. I fetched a cup of coffee. I found a footstool for Ruth's swollen ankles. When Ruth asked how we met, Nora and I answered at the exact same second. At my father's shop, and then looked at each other, startled, because it wasn't even a lie. She had come to my father's furniture shop 9 years ago with a broken chair, and I had fixed the chair, and I had never stopped wanting to fix things for her since. Ruth watched us look at each other. Old people see everything. "Yes," she said softly, satisfied, settling back. "Yes, all right, good." And somewhere in those minutes, something strange happened. We stopped pretending. I don't know exactly when it turned. Maybe when Nora reached over without thinking and straightened my collar, the way she used to every single morning for 9 years, her fingers brushing my neck, and then froze, realizing what she'd done. Maybe when I poured her a coffee too, black, no sugar, the way she takes it, without asking, and set it in front of her, and watched the truth land in her eyes, that I still knew, that after 4 years and another whole marriage, I still knew exactly how she liked her coffee. She looked at that cup for a long time. Then she looked at me, and when Ruth was pulled into conversation by a cousin, Nora leaned in close, and under the noise of the room, she finally started to explain. "He was a good man," she whispered. "Arthur, I need you to know that first, before you think anything." Her thumb ran along the rim of the cup. "He was a retired school teacher, a widower. He lived 2 doors down from the treatment center, and we started talking in the waiting room. His sister was sick too at the end. And when I got worse, when I couldn't work, when the bills," she stopped, swallowed. "He knew I could never love him the way. He knew, Sam, from the very first. I told him about you the second week, the whole thing, and he just smiled at me and said, 'Nora, you're keeping a light on for somebody. That's a fine thing to do. Don't ever let me talk you out of it.' I couldn't speak. There was a stone in my throat the size of a fist. 'He married me to give me a roof,' she said. And now the tears were coming, silent, running straight down without her face even moving. 'His insurance, his name to hide behind, so I could get treatment and keep my dignity. That's what our marriage was, Sam. 2 lonely people keeping each other company on a hard road. He never asked me for anything I couldn't give. He was the kindest man I ever knew, except for one.' Her eyes came up to mine, and I left that one because I decided I wasn't worth staying for. The room roared quiet around me. 4 years of not understanding. 4 years of thinking she'd stopped loving me, that she'd traded up, that I'd been so easy to leave. And here it was, the truth, in a funeral home, from the wife I'd lost, at the funeral of the man who'd sheltered her when I hadn't fought hard enough to. 'Nora,' I managed. 'Why didn't you?' 3 weeks ago.' She cut across me, and her voice broke completely now, cracking into pieces. At the very end, he could barely talk, Sam, but he grabbed my hand. His hand was so weak, and he pulled me close, and he said," She stopped. Her whole body was shaking. Ruth was turning back toward us, sensing something, and across the room a man in a dark suit had stepped up to the podium and was tapping the microphone. And any second now, the service would begin, and she'd have to stand and be strong in front of 200 people who all believed a story that wasn't true. "He said what, Nora?" I whispered. "What did Arthur say?" She reached up to the collar of her black dress. Her fingers were trembling so hard she could barely manage it, and she drew out a thin gold chain from under the fabric, from against her skin, from over her heart, and on the end of that chain hung a ring. My ring. The plain gold wedding band I had put on her hand 9 years ago, in a courthouse, when we had nothing but each other, and thought that was everything. She had worn it against her heart, under her clothes, through her whole marriage to another man, for 4 years. And before she could tell me what Arthur said with his dying breath, before I could do anything but stare at that ring catching the light, the man at the podium leaned into the microphone, and his voice filled the room. "If everyone could please find a seat, we'll begin." Nora's hand closed around the ring. She wiped her face fast, sat up straight, put the still mask back on, and she stood to take her place in the front row as the grieving widow of Arthur Bell, leaving me standing there at the back, holding the pieces of everything I thought I'd understood about the last 4 years of my life. That's where I have to stop for a second, because what she told me next, what Arthur said with the last strength in his body, is the thing that changed everything, and I need you to hear it exactly the way I did. The service lasted an hour, and I sat in the back row and watched the woman I loved grieve, a man I owed everything to. That's a strange thing to feel at a funeral, gratitude, but that's what filled me up while the pastor spoke, and Arthur's old friends stood one by one to tell their stories. Because every single story was about the same thing. Arthur Bell showing up for people. Arthur driving 2 hours to fix a former student's flat tire. Arthur paying a young couple's grocery bill and swearing the cashier to secrecy. Arthur who married a sick woman with a broken heart and asked for nothing but the chance to make her road easier. And I understood, sitting there, that I'd spent 4 years quietly hating a ghost. I'd built this man up in my mind as the one who took her, the one who won, the one who got the life I couldn't hold. And he wasn't any of that. He was just a kind man who found her drowning and held out a hand, same as I'd tried to. He just did it better than I had, because when it counted, he didn't let go. I watched Nora in the front row. She sat next to Ruth, holding the old woman's hand, and she was so still and so composed that only I could see what it was costing her. I knew that stillness. I'd married that stillness. She held herself together the way a cracked beam holds a roof, perfectly, right up until the second it doesn't. When the service ended, they wheeled the casket out, and everyone filed into the next room, where there was coffee and sandwiches and those little butter cookies nobody actually eats. A repast. And I knew, without her telling me, that this was the 40 minutes. This was the part she needed a husband for. Until they took Ruth home. She found me by the coffee again. It was becoming our place, that little table with the urn and the stack of cups. She didn't grab my arm this time. She just stood next to me, close, and let out a breath. "You're still here," she said. I said 40 minutes. I handed her a cup, black, no sugar. "I've got about 30 left." She laughed, a small, wet, broken laugh, and it was the best sound I'd heard in 4 years. "Ruth wants us to sit with her," she said. "She won't leave until her nephew comes to drive her, and he's always late. Can you—" "Nora." I set my cup down. "You were about to tell me something. Before the service. About what Arthur said." She went still. Her eyes dropped to her cup, and for a moment I thought she wouldn't. I thought she'd put the mask back on and make me spend my last 30 minutes being a polite stranger. But then she reached up and drew out the chain again, held the ring in her fingers, in the open this time, not hiding it, and she looked at it, instead of me while she talked, like it was easier that way. "He'd known for a couple of weeks that he wasn't going to make it," she said. "He wasn't scared. That's the thing about Arthur. He was never scared of anything, but he kept looking at me with this worried face. And 3 weeks ago, I was sitting by his bed, and he took my hand, and he could barely get the words out, but he said," her voice cracked. She pushed through it. "He said, 'Nora, when I'm gone, I don't want you to grieve me long. I've had a good, full life, and you gave me a lovely last chapter of it, and that's plenty.' And then he said," she pressed her lips together hard, "he said, 'You go and you find your woodworker, that man you never stopped loving. You've grieved a living man for 4 years, and that's the only grief in this house that ever broke my heart. Go home to him. Tell him you were wrong to leave, and if he's half the man you described, he'll already know.'" The room tilted. "Your woodworker. He knew what I did," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. He knew my trade. He knew everything about you. She was crying now, but smiling through it. This terrible, beautiful smile. I talked about you for 4 years, Sam. He used to say I described you like you were a house I got locked out of. He said it so many times. Nora and her woodworker. Like you were a bedtime story. She wiped her face. He sent me back to you with his last breath. That's the kind of man we buried today. He spent his dying words giving me away. To you. I couldn't hold it anymore. Something that had been rusted shut in my chest for 4 years cracked open right there by the coffee urn, and my eyes went hot and blurry, and I had to look up at the ceiling to keep from coming apart in a room full of strangers. I never understood, I said when I could talk. 4 years, Nora. I thought you stopped loving me. I thought I was easy to leave. Easy? She said it like the word hurt her. Sam, leaving you was like cutting off my own arm and telling everyone I never needed it. I sat in my car outside our apartment for 2 hours after I signed the papers. I couldn't drive. I just kept thinking, I've made the worst mistake of my life, and I have to be brave enough to live inside it, because it's the loving thing to do. She shook her head. I was so sure. I was so sure I was giving you a gift. A whole life. A wife who could give you children and hike up mountains and grow old strong instead of this. She gestured down at herself, at her own body, with a kind of contempt that broke me. I decided I was a burden, and I decided it for you, without asking you, because I was too much of a coward to let you decide it for yourself. And there it was, the whole shape of the thing that had ruined us. She hadn't left because she stopped loving me. She'd left because she loved me and got scared and made a decision that belonged to both of us, all by herself. You should have let me choose, I said quietly. I know. I would have chosen you. Sick? Well, any of it. I would have chosen you every single time, Nora. I know that now. Her voice was barely a whisper. Arthur made me know it. He spent 4 years telling me. That man would have stayed, Nora. You didn't save him. You just left him. She looked up at me finally, her eyes red and full. He was right, wasn't he? I didn't set you free. I just left you. I opened my mouth to answer. And that's when Ruth's voice cut across the room, sharp and bright. There they are, my 2 lovebirds. Come here, come sit. My nephew's finally on his way. We wiped our faces fast. We walked over, and for the next 15 minutes, we sat on either side of a 94-year-old woman, and we were, God help us, a married couple. She held both our hands. She told us about Arthur as a little boy, how he used to bring home broken birds and stray cats, how she always knew he'd marry someone who needed saving because that was just his nature. He picked well with you, Nora, Ruth said, patting her hand. You needed him, and he needed to be needed. That's a marriage. Then she turned her sharp old eyes on me. But you look at her different than my Arthur did. She said it plain, not unkind, just true. The way very old people say things they've stopped being afraid to say. Arthur looked at Nora like a man looking after something precious. You look at her like a man who'd walk into a fire. I've been on this earth 94 years, young man. I know the difference. The whole table went quiet. Nora's hand tightened in mine. I didn't know what to say, so I told the truth, because I'm not a fast man, and I've never been a good liar. Yes, ma'am, I said. I would. Ruth nodded, slow and satisfied, like she'd confirmed something she already suspected. Good, she said. She deserves that. She spent a lot of years being brave for other people. It's about time somebody was brave for her. She patted my hand. Don't you let her talk you out of it. She'll try. She's a talker-outer. My Arthur said the same. And I swear, in that moment, sitting in a funeral home, holding the hand of a dying woman's mother-in-law, I felt like Arthur and Ruth had reached across the whole veil between the living and the dead and handed Nora to me on purpose, like this whole terrible day had been arranged. 2 old people making sure a stranger got home safe. Then the nephew came, flustered, apologizing, jingling his keys, and it was time for Ruth to go. She stood up slow, gripping her cane, and she reached up and took my face in both her shaking hands and pulled it down to her level and looked at me hard. You take care of our girl, she said fiercely. You hear me? Arthur can't anymore, so you do it. I will, I said. And I meant it with everything I had. Even though I had no right to. Even though the 40 minutes were almost gone. She kissed Nora's cheek, and she let her nephew lead her toward the door. And at the door she turned back one last time, this tiny, fierce old woman, and she lifted her cane in a little wave, and she called across the whole room, "Goodbye, my darlings." And then she was gone, and the 40 minutes were up. I felt it the second the door closed behind Ruth. The air changed. The job was done. The lie had held. Ruth would go home believing her son had been loved and that his widow was safe. And none of that was fully true, and all of it was kind. Nora had done what she came to do. And now there was nothing left holding us together but the ring around her neck and 4 years of things we'd finally, too late, said out loud. I watched Nora feel it too. I watched her spine straighten. I watched the composure come back down over her face like a curtain. And it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen, because I knew what it meant. It meant she was about to be brave again. It meant she was about to do the loving, terrible thing she always did, decide what was best for me, without asking. She turned to me, and she was already reaching for the chain around her neck. "Thank you, Sam." Her voice was steady now, awful and steady. "I mean it. You have no idea what you just gave me." And her. She glanced at the door, where Ruth had gone. I got to give that old woman a peaceful goodbye. I got to be someone who was loved, in front of the one person who needed to believe it. I'll remember today for the rest of my life. She lifted the chain over her head. The ring swung, catching the light. "And you should have this back," she said. "I never should have kept it this long. It wasn't fair to you, wearing it while I was married to somebody else. It's yours. It always was." She held it out to me in her open palm, that plain gold band that had lived against her heart for 4 years. "Go home, Sam. Go find someone who can give you everything I couldn't. You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known, and you've wasted enough of it on me. Go be happy. Please, let me finally be the one thing I tried to be 4 years ago and failed. Let me set you free." And she pressed my my ring. The ring I gave her. She pressed it into my hand and folded my fingers around it, the exact way you'd close a book you were finished reading. The exact same gesture I'd have made, if I were her, trying to be brave. She was doing it again, right in front of me. She was deciding my whole life was better without her, and she was handing me back the last piece of us, and she was calling it love. She was going to walk out of that funeral home and disappear into her illness and her grief and her certainty that she was a burden. And she was going to let me drive 40 minutes home to an empty shop and a half-finished cradle, and she was going to spend the rest of her days believing she'd done the noble thing. And I stood there with the ring warm in my closed fist, and I felt 4 years of grief and 4 years of silence and my own cowardice rise up in me all at once. Because I had let her do this to me once already. I had stood in a doorway 4 years ago and let her convince me that leaving was love. I had let her walk. I had been calm, and I had been reasonable, and I had let the best thing in my life talk herself out the door, because I was too scared to fight for what I wanted. Not again. My father's voice was suddenly in my ears, clear as the smell of the sawdust in his old shop. Anything can be saved if you're patient enough to stop looking at what's broken and start looking at what's still good. I opened my hand. I looked at the ring, and I looked at Nora, already turning away from me, already squaring her shoulders to walk out of my life for the second time. And I did the thing I should have done 4 years ago. I didn't take the ring. "No," I said. Nora stopped, half turned away, chain empty in her hand. She went still. "No," she said. "I'm not taking it back." I held out my hand, the ring sitting in my open palm now, offered back to her. "It's not mine, Nora. I gave it to you 9 years ago, and I meant it for the rest of your life. I never once took my meaning back. You're the one who's been carrying it around like a debt. It was never a debt. It was a promise. And I keep my promises, even when I'm too much of a coward to say so out loud for 4 years." Her face started to come apart. "Sam, don't. Please. I can't do this again. I barely survived leaving you the first time. Don't make me stand in a funeral home and do it again. Then don't do it." I stepped closer. "That's the whole thing, Nora. That's the part you've never understood. Nobody's making you leave. You keep leaving because you decided a long time ago that you're a broken thing, and broken things get thrown away. I felt my voice shake, and I let it. But I fix broken things for a living. It's the only thing I've ever been good at. And I'm telling you, as the man who's spent 20 years learning the difference, you are not broken. You got hurt. That is not the same thing. And I would know. You don't understand what you'd be signing up for. The tears were pouring now, and she wasn't wiping them. It's not going to get better, Sam. This illness, it stays. There are days I can't get out of bed. There are days I can't be a wife the way a wife is supposed to. There are going to be hospitals, and bills, and me getting worse, not better. And you deserve so much more than a life spent taking care of somebody who... Stop. I said it soft, but it stopped her. Let me tell you what I've been doing for 4 years. You want to know? I've been keeping a cradle in the corner of my shop. The one I built when we were trying. I never finished it. Never threw it out. I've walked past it every single morning for 4 years. Half sanded, sitting there in the sawdust, because getting rid of it felt like agreeing with you. My own voice broke clean in half. Every morning, Nora. 4 years. Because throwing it out meant admitting you were right to leave, and I never, not for one single day, believed you were right to leave. She put her hand over her mouth. You keep talking about everything you can't give me. I stepped in close enough to take her free hand, ring and all. A woman who can hike mountains. A woman who can give me children. A whole strong life. And I'm telling you, I never once asked for any of that. I asked for you. Just you. Sick, tired, scared, worse, all of it. I have never in my life wanted the woman who could hike a mountain. I wanted the woman who came into my father's shop with a broken chair and looked at me like I was worth talking to. That woman is standing right here. She's just been trying to convince me for 4 years that I'd be better off without her. And I have finally figured out how to say no. Sam. My name came out of her like it was the only word she had left. You should have let me choose 4 years ago, I said. So I'm choosing now, and this time you don't get a vote. I'm not taking the ring. It's yours. You wear it, or you carry it over your heart like you have been. I don't care which, but you don't hand it back to me. And you don't walk out that door, and you don't spend one more day of your life deciding you're a burden to a man who has spent 4 years unable to throw away a half-built cradle. I closed her fingers around the ring, the way she'd closed mine, except I was giving it back to her, not taking it. Come home. Not for 40 minutes. Not to save you. Just come home. I've missed you every single day, and I am done being brave about it. For a long moment she just looked at me. This woman I'd loved for 9 years and lost for 4, standing in a black dress in a funeral home that smelled of lilies and old coffee, her dead husband's kindness still hanging in the air around us both. And then she broke. All the way. She folded forward into my chest, and I caught her. And she cried the way you cry when you've been holding something up for 4 years and somebody finally takes the weight. Great shaking sobs into my shirt. Her fists knotted in the fabric like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. He told me you'd say that, she wept. Arthur, he told me. He said, that man's going to fight for you, Nora. And when he does, don't you dare be brave. Let him. Then let me, I said into her hair. Just this once. Let me. And she nodded against my chest. Yes. Finally, after 4 years. Yes. I want to be honest with you, because this is where a lot of stories lie, and I promised myself I'd never lie to you. Nothing happened fast after that. That's how I knew it was real. She didn't move into my house that week. We were careful with each other, the way you're careful with a joint you've re-glued and aren't sure will hold weight yet. She was still grieving Arthur, and she should have been. He'd earned every tear. I didn't want to be the man who rushed a good woman out of mourning a good man. So I did what I know how to do. I showed up, slow and steady and patient. I drove the 40 minutes to her town on Saturdays. I learned the new geography of her illness, the medications lined up on the counter, the good days and the bad days, the exact way she liked the pillows stacked on the mornings she couldn't get up. I met her doctors. I sat in the waiting rooms Arthur used to sit in, and I sent up a quiet thank you to him every time. At 1 month, I finished the cradle. Not because we needed it. We'd made our peace with that, and there are more ways to build a family than one, and we'd figure that out together in time. I finished it because it was time to stop keeping a broken thing in the corner of my life. I sanded it down to smooth, and I oiled the wood until it glowed, and I gave it to a young couple down the road from my shop who were expecting and couldn't afford one. Arthur would have liked that, I think, passing the kindness down the line. At 2 months, my coffee mug lived in her kitchen again, and she'd started humming while she cooked. This little tuneless thing she does when she's happy and doesn't know she's doing it. I hadn't heard it in 4 years. The first time I caught her doing it, I had to go stand in the other room for a minute so she wouldn't see my face. At 3 months, on a bad day, a really bad day, she looked up at me from the bed where she couldn't get up, and she said, This is what I was trying to protect you from. This is the part that isn't fair to you." And I sat down on the edge of that bed, and I took her hand, and I said, "Nora, I don't measure what a thing is worth by what it can do on its best day. I measure it by whether it's still good underneath. And you are the best thing I have ever put my hands to. There is no version of this where you are the burden. You're the whole reason. Now scoot over." I brought soup and a terrible movie. She stopped trying to protect me from herself after that. Slowly. It's hard to keep believing you're a weight on a man when he just keeps showing up, cheerful and stubborn, acting like getting to sit with you on a bad day is the good part of his week. Because it was. It is. At a year, we stood in a courthouse. The same courthouse, actually, where we'd married the first time, 9 years before, with nothing but each other. No lilies this time. Just us, and a judge, and 2 witnesses, and Ruth. Ruth came, 95 now, sharper than ever, in a purple dress because she said she was done with black. She sat in the front row with her cane, and when the judge got to the part about rings, Nora just laughed and held up her hand, because the ring was already there. My ring, the one she'd carried over her heart through 4 years and another whole marriage. She'd put it back on in daylight months before, and she'd never taken it off again, and she never would. Afterward, Ruth took my face in both her shaking hands one more time, the way she had at the funeral, and she pulled me down and looked at me hard with those bright old eyes. "I told you," she said. "A man who'd walk into a fire. I knew it the second I saw you." She patted my cheek. "My Arthur knew it too. He sent her to you on purpose, you know. That whole last year, all he talked about was making sure his Nora wasn't left alone." Her eyes filled. "You made an old woman's son right. He wanted her looked after, and now she is. You let him rest." Ruth passed that winter, peacefully, in her sleep, 95 years old, believing every single good thing about the son she raised, and every word of it was true. Arthur Bell was a man who found a drowning woman and held out his hand and asked for nothing, and then, at the very end, gave her back to the person who could love her right. There was never a lie in that funeral home worth calling a lie. There was only kindness, wearing the shape of one. I think about that day more than Nora knows. The lilies, the coffee urn, the 40 minutes, the frail old woman crossing the room with her cane. And here's the truth I've never told my wife, the one I'll probably carry to my own grave, because some things are better just known than said. She thinks she grabbed my arm that day because she needed a husband for 40 minutes. She didn't need saving. Not really. Nora is the strongest person I have ever met. She'd have gotten Ruth through that repast alone. Chin up, dry-eyed, the way she survived everything else life threw at her. She didn't grab my arm because she couldn't do it without me. She grabbed my arm because a dying man spent his last good breath pointing her back toward the person who'd spent 4 years unable to throw away a half-built cradle. She thought she was borrowing a husband for 40 minutes. Arthur knew he was giving one back for good. She reached for me thinking she needed me to save her. She's the one who brought me home. So let me ask you something. Before you go, and I want you to really sit with it, because I've been sitting with it for a year. Nora spent 4 years convinced that loving me meant leaving me. That the kindest thing she could do for the person she loved most was to decide, all by herself, that she wasn't worth staying for. And she was wrong. She robbed us both of 4 years being brave about the wrong thing. So here's my question. Is there someone in your life you've quietly decided you're a burden to? Someone you've been pushing away, or holding at arm's length, telling yourself it's for their own good, when the truth is, you've never actually let them choose? Because I promise you, somewhere out there, There's a person walking past a half-built cradle every single morning, refusing to throw it out, waiting for you to stop being brave and just come home. Don't make them wait 4 years like I almost did. Let them choose you. You might be amazed what they pick. Tell me in the comments, has someone ever walked back into your life at the exact moment you'd given up hope? The right person, the right day, like something bigger than luck was steering it? I read every single one, and it honestly amazes me how far these stories travel. And tell me where in the world you're watching from tonight. If this story moved you even a little, do me one small kindness. Tap that like button so it finds the next person who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. I'm here every week with a brand new story about the kind of love that shows up right when we've stopped believing it ever will. Take care of your people, choose them out loud, and I'll see you next time.